warm welcome to everyone who has joined us. Sorry, I can't introduce each one by name, uh, but would love to. But then that would be the whole midweek, and that would not be encouraging to others. You're joining the midweek, and so hopefully today is an encouraging midweek for us all to be able to get into God's word and to be able to learn and grow. So before I continue, I want to wish Mama Lizwe and Ronald a very happy birthday. That's really great. Today is their birthday, so please do wish them happy birthday. And also, again, before we open up, let's start with the word of prayer, and then we can dive into the lesson. Let's go to God in prayer. Dear God in heaven, thank you. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to approach your throne of grace. We come before you because you allow us to. And thank you for this time, that you grant us. Father, you know what each and every one of us are going through, what we're going through as a global community, what we're going through in South Africa, and what each one of us is going through. I pray your peace that transcends understanding can move and shape us. I pray for those that are grieving. I pray especially for Baba Jeff and McGran, who have gone through so much grief in such a short space of time. Please heal and see the family through this exceptionally difficult time. I pray also, Father, for the Melissa family and for Esther, who's suffering from severe headaches. I pray, Lord, that you be with those that have lost loved ones, whose loved ones are in the hospital. And I pray you just guide us and protect us and comfort us supernaturally. I pray that each one of us can, in our own space, in our own way, be a support to one another, and just help us through this exceptionally difficult time. Lord, you are real, you're King. And even as we get into the New Testament today and look at the Sermon on the Mount, that you are with us. And that I pray each one feels you, feels your presence, experiences you in a powerful way, and to see us through these incredibly difficult and tough times. Lord, I thank you so much again for the privilege we get to approach you for this midweek. Pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. So, wanted to just start with the New Testament in 120 days. If you haven't received a copy of it, I'll post it later on the chat. You can download it. For those who are visiting and you're wondering what in the world is the New Testament in 120 days, well, I'm about to explain to you. We have started as a church to read through the entire New Testament from Matthew all the way to Revelation. Don't worry, not in one sitting. That's going to take a long, that's going to be difficult. But there's a reading plan that really is not too intensive. You're reading a few chapters a day, and we go through it together. And our Sundays and midweek lessons are from the weekly reading plans. And so we're going to be in it for 120 days, so the next 4 months. And so if you are visiting and if you'd like to join us, you're welcome to join us. I'm going to see how I can post the 120-day plan on this chat group in just a bit. And also I wanted to just also say it's really exciting that it's not just going to be me and Tamba preaching through the New Testament in 120 days. We actually have 12 others that are going to be part of the preaching schedule. So you will hear from them. And isn't that exciting? Like in the next 4 months, you're going to hear from 12 others that will be teaching on Sundays or midweeks, all from the New Testament. So really exciting, and anyone can join. In fact, my dad, he mentioned it to his eye doctor, and his eye doctor said, "Hey, I want to join in also. Can you send me the plan?" And then the eye doctor's receptionist found out, and she asked my dad, "Can I also get the reading plan? Because I would like to read through the New Testament." And so really, it's an amazing opportunity to reach out to our friends and colleagues and pass it along. Um, it's for free. There's no payment required. You can just follow through the reading plan, and you're always welcome to join us Sundays or midweek lessons. And so again, hopefully it's an amazing time of encountering Jesus and building our faith through this trying time. So today we're going to start with the Gospel of Matthew. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I want to start with the structure of the Gospel of Matthew. When you read the Gospels, sometimes it doesn't seem like the authors of the Gospel actually had a structure. It just seems like a whole lot of information just sort of crammed in there. But the authors actually made decisions guided by the Holy Spirit, of course. And you'll see very quickly when we go through the structure, it's actually really helpful when we understand the structure to be able to read the Gospel of Matthew, hopefully in a much more enlightened way, so you can get what the author is saying. So there are three main sections of the Gospel of Matthew. The first one is introduction, that goes from chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 4 verse 16. And then you have the main contents or the body of the Gospel from chapter 4 verse 17 to 16 verse 20. And then you have the conclusion from 16:21 to 28:20. Now you might be thinking, how do you know this? How do we know that this is the structure the author intended? Well, I'm glad you asked. Check out the introduction to these major sections. So in Matthew 4 verse 17, the Bible reads, "From that time on, Jesus began to preach, 'Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near.'" Check out Matthew 16 verse 21. "From that time on, Jesus began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things at the hands of the elders, the chief priests, and the teachers of the law, and that he must be killed and on the third day be raised to life." It's not a coincidence. You see that phrase, "from that time on"? Well, that's the introduction to a new section. And Matthew does that very intentionally. And so that's how we know that the first section goes from chapter 1 verse 1 to chapter 4 verse 16. He starts the second section, verse 14, chapter 4 verse 17, sorry. And then he starts the last section, chapter 16, verse 21, based on this clue that we get from that time on. And he carries on. So within these main sections, Matthew also does something very interesting. He splits the gospel into 5 discourses or teaching sections. And it's very intentional, and you'll see why in just a bit, and the relevance of why is it 5 and not 6 or 4. So the first lesson of the teaching section, or what's called discourse, is Matthew 5 verse 1 to Matthew 7 verse 29. The second one is Matthew 10 verse 1 to verse 42. The third one, Matthew 13 verses 1 to 58. The fourth one is Matthew 18 verses 1 to 35. And then finally, the fifth one, Matthew 24 Matthew 24 verses 1 to 25 verse 46. So the 5 teaching sections, as you'll see on the screen. So again, the question is, you might be wondering, how do we know? How do we know these are 5 teaching sections? Why not 4? Why not 6? Or are we just? What's the clues in the text itself? Well, check out what the author does, and that's how we know there are 5 sections of teaching. Notice that he concludes the section by this phrase: "When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching." This is the conclusion of the Sermon on the Mount. But notice what Matthew does at the end of the second discourse. It says, after Jesus had finished instructing his disciples, he went on from there to teach and preach in the towns of Galilee. And then the third one, the same thing. When Jesus had finished these parables, he moved on from there. And then the same thing, when Jesus had finished saying these things, that's the end of the fourth discourse. And then you would have guessed the fifth one would be the same thing, when Jesus had finished saying all these things. And so that's how we know there's intentionality of construction of the gospel, of course, guided by the Holy Spirit. And I'll add this too, in case you're wondering, I think sometimes in our discussions of how the gospels came to be, I think we miss a very big chunk of importance, and that is Jesus himself. Jesus spent time with his disciples. And so too often, we forget that he was the brilliant teacher, the best in the world ever, right? And so it's very possible, again, speculative on my part, but surely possible that he taught Matthew, he taught Peter, he taught his disciples how to think about stuff. Now, maybe they didn't grasp all of it as he was teaching, evidence from the gospel itself. But then as they got the Holy Spirit after Jesus' death, resurrection, ascension, it all started to make sense. And so then, again, speculative on my part, there's no definite, I cannot definitely say, but these sections possibly could have been either Jesus teaching them, but certainly Holy Spirit given insight. Now, you might be wondering, why 5? Why not 4? Why not 3? Because very intentionally, the 5 teaching sections reflect the 5 books, the first 5 books of the Bible, the Torah. The Torah, often translated even as the law, is Genesis to Deuteronomy. And so the intention of the author is that Jesus is the new Moses. And that's one of the themes of the Gospel of Matthew. So again, different Gospels emphasize different aspects. Matthew emphasizes Jesus as the new Moses, and he does that through his Gospel. So as we understand the sections and how it's set up, hopefully as we read the Gospel of Matthew, we get more out of it. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, we'll get to the Sermon on the Mount in just a bit. And I wanted to start with, in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 5, check out in verse 1. And this again highlights Jesus as the new Moses. So Matthew 5, in verse 1, the Bible reads, "Now, when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them." So that's a very important detail, that Jesus went up on a mountainside. Because when you go back to the Old Testament, the Exodus narrative, Moses goes up to the mountain and he gets the law. And so very intentionally, the gospel writer Matthew is pointing to Jesus as now the new Moses. He is now giving instructions, because that's what the law is. The law is both the narrative from Genesis to Deuteronomy, but the law, I know for us today, we think of law, we think of, don't run the red lights or red robots. But law in the Jewish mindset was simply instruction. And so Jesus is now giving instructions to his people. And that's what the Sermon on the Mount is. There's also something very interesting Jesus does with the Sermon on the Mount. And it's a very common teaching technique in the Bible, a common literary tool, and it's called chiasm. And if you've never heard of chiasm, that's okay. But hopefully today it helps. But we'll see the importance of chiasm as we read the Sermon on the Mount. So the example of chiasm in Matthew 11, verse 28, for example, is Matthew 11, verse 28 says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. So this particular chiasm has the rhythm of A, B, C, C, B, A. So as you see, the first line, if you designate it with the letter A, is come to me, all who are weary and burdened. The next line, I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. If you notice the next two lines, and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart. And that then is the center, if you will, of this section. And then B repeats the first part of B, which is you will find rest for your soul, for my yoke is easy. Do you notice how this repeats in a sense, but it doesn't repeat word for word. It repeats, but with extra emphasis. And that's one of the reasons chiasm is an effective literary tool. And then it ends with the first thought in A, come to me, all who are weary and burdened. And it ends with my burden is light. So chiasm is a great way of giving information in a poetic way. It's easy to remember, but also it's not dull, it's not boring. And check out how interesting when you read it in this manner, in the chiastic, in the manner that it's written. You can go with you can join, for example, the first verse, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened," with the last one, "and my burden is light." You can do the same with the two B's, "and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and you will find rest for your soul. For my yoke is easy." And the C's, "and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart." Isn't that incredible? Isn't God's word so rich? Now check out another type of chiasm. It's the ABBA. And so Proverbs 24 verse 17, the first part is, "Do not gloat when your enemy falls, when they stumble, and do not let your heart rejoice." And it's called chiasm because it comes from the Greek letter, which is the X. And so if you read it from ABBA, it really helps to take the first part, which is "do not gloat," and it expands it on the second part, which is "do not let your heart rejoice." And the chunk of it, the middle part, it's like a sandwich. "When your enemy falls, when they stumble." So again, it's poetic, it's easy to remember, and it was a very common literary technique that the authors used in writing of the Bible. Here's another type of chiasm. In this case, it's ABCBA, meaning C is the focus of that section. So John 4 verse 23, "Yet the time is coming and has now come when the true worshippers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in spirit and in truth." So what's the thrust of this passage? What's the focus of this passage? You guessed it. God is spirit. And so again, chiasm was used for that purpose also, was to zoom into the main point the author is making. And it's constructed in such a way that it is very obvious for those who understand the chiastic structure, which they would have. And that's where we have to learn how to understand what they wrote, because that's a literary technique that was common in biblical times. So what does it all have to do with the Sermon on the Mount? Well, a lot, actually. And hopefully when I go through it, it'll really open up the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is constructed as a chiastic sermon. And sometimes we can read, and I've done this for the longest time, I'd read the Sermon on the Mount, and I'll take the first Beatitudes, and I'll sort of just read it, and then I'd read the rest of it almost disconnected with the Beatitudes. I don't know if you've ever done that, what I have, and it's yeah, I still got a lot from it because that's the power of God's word. You don't need to learn literary techniques of ancient biblical times. We can still read the scriptures and get a lot from it, and that praise God for that. But then understanding the chiastic structure really can bring this to life. And I'm sorry I didn't put the reference here, but this is from Michael Burns' book, People of the Coming Age. That's where I got this from. So I'm sorry I didn't footnote my reference. So let me just go. Let's just talk through the chiastic structure. If you notice, it starts with the poor in spirit, and if you notice at the end, it's the recognizing your need. Matthew 7, verses 7 to 11. So what Jesus' sermon unpacks is that he gives you the Beatitudes, and I'll read that just now. In Matthew 5, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they'll see God. Blessed are peacemakers, for they'll be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And then in subsequent verses, he expands and explains each of the Beatitudes. And that's where the chiastic structure is so effective. It's an amazing teaching tool. So let's go through that and see how it plays out. Matthew 5, verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And in Matthew 7, verse 7 to 11, Jesus expands this concept of being poor in spirit. And check out in verse 7, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened. Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? So do you see, when we read Matthew 7, verses 7 to 11, outside the chiastic structure, this can seem a bit odd. In fact, people have even misused the scripture and used it as some kind of prosperity gospel type thing. But within the chiastic structure, that's the heart that Jesus wants his people to have. And so I want to say this very carefully and very clearly. The Sermon on the Mount is not just written to individuals, okay? It's written, speak to Jesus's people. In fact, Matthew 5 even says then, verse 2, he says, and he began to teach them, right? So a community. He didn't just begin to teach one person. Now, definitely there's a personal component to this. No doubt, do not misunderstand. But for a very long time, I used to read Sermon on the Mount as an individual, right? And then it kind of feels heavy. It's like, oh man, I gotta be this, I gotta be that. But flip it around to now a communal aspect. Blessed are the poor in spirit, Swanee Church of Christ. And then the expansion of it is ask and it will be given to you. Seek, you'll find. Knock and the door will be open to you. What is Jesus saying? He's saying, have that humble heart that I'm not all that. I'm not all that. Okay, there's a humility that comes about. Now, this is a practice of living out under King Jesus. This is the practice of living out the life of Christ in the present time, anticipating the future when Jesus returns. What the Jews call the age to come. The Sermon on the Mount is not some moral teaching. And that's a terrible way of reading it, because then we feel like, oh, I can never be this. Well, that's precisely the point. Blessed are the poor in spirit is us saying, I can never be that. And so Jesus says, yeah, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open to you. In other words, we are called to live out a future reality. We can think of it as eternal life, life of the age to come, but in the present time. And what is that life of the age to come look like? Well, it looks like the Sermon on the Mount people. And so what does that mean? That means that we'll never arrive. It means that I have to always have a humble heart. And as a community, we ought to have a humble heart to learn, to ask, to seek, to find. This could be even relevant and practical in our relationships with each other. You know, in complex challenges that we face, whether it be racial injustice, social injustice, whether it be poverty, it could be so many aspects of life that are complex. Blessed are the poor in spirit. We don't get to, we haven't arrived. And we don't have all the answers. But that's okay. Ask, it'll be given to you. Seek and you'll find. Knock and the door will be open to you. And then Jesus is telling us this is the kind of community you want to be. Now, the opposite of this poor in spirit community would be what? An arrogant, rich in spirit community. I know everything. We know everything. Don't tell us. Do not critique us. Do not tell us that we don't know what we're doing, because we do, and you have no place to say anything about us that makes us feel like we, that challenges us. That's the exact opposite. The Sermon on the Mount people are like, no, we actually want to know. Well, blessed are those who are poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Check out Matthew 5, verse 4. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. The expansion of that is Matthew 7, verse 1 to 6. Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. But the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. But do not give dogs what is sacred. Do not throw pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. It's like, what's the connection between mourning and be comforted and judgment? Well, a whole lot. Jesus wants us to be a people who have his heart for what has plagued God's good creation, his good creation, which is sin. You know, it's so easy, and maybe you've thought this sometime. I know I have. You know, it's like, why doesn't God just wipe out all evil people? Wouldn't that be easier? Like all the rapists and all these terrible people, if we can just get rid of them. Well, unfortunately, the line of evil is not them people there. It runs through each and every one of us. So if God was going to actually do that, wipe out evil from this earth, he's wiping us out, all of us, not just those people over there. And so Jesus wants us to have this heart of mourning for what has plagued his good creation. And so how do we do that? Well, notice what Jesus says, and I'll start in verse 6. Do not give dogs what is sacred. It's like, whoa, that sounds harsh. But the first verse is where we mostly start, right? Do not judge, or you too will be judged. Don't judge me. You cannot judge me. Well, Jesus is making this judgment in verse 6. Do not give dogs what is sacred. It's like, wow, imagine, being told that. And what's he doing? Jesus is saying, look, we have to have the heart of mourning for those who have gone astray. And it starts with us recognizing our own plank before we help out the others in the community with the speck in their eye. But guess what? Not everybody's going to want this, so be careful. There are going to be people who do not want. They'll in fact trample you under feet. But you know what? Mourn about that too. you'll be comforted. Isn't that crazy? But I've experienced that, where someone's helping me with my sin, and they felt sad. Or I've done that where I felt sad about someone else's sin as I'm helping them, and then they refuse to help, and it really does feel like they're trampling, not just the teaching, but it feels like they're trampling me under their feet. To mourn for them, to say, Lord, this is sad. It's so sad. So again, the chiasm really helps us explain. Let me just continue on before in verse 5. I mean, we can spend a lot of time on each one of these, and it's a whole other series in itself. But hopefully this is giving us a great high-level view of the Sermon on the Mount and the chiastic structure that helps us to read it and understand the life of Christ that Jesus calls his disciples, his community to. Matthew 5 verse 5, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. What's the expansion of this teaching? This might surprise us. Matthew 6 verse 19 to 34. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourself treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life? And why do you worry about clothes? See how the flowers of the field grow. They do not labor or spin. Yet I tell you that not even Solomon in all his splendor was dressed like one of these. See, if that is how God clothes the grass of the field, which is here today and tomorrow is thrown into the fire, will he not much more clothe you, you of little faith? So do not worry, saying, what shall we eat? What shall we drink? What shall we wear? For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself. Each day has enough trouble of its own. Now, I know these two may seem completely unrelated, right? But think about it. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. What's the constant message that we are bombarded with? You got to take what's yours. And you can't be passive. You have to be active, aggressive. And you have to take it, or else it will be taken from you. No one's just going to give it to you, right? Blessed are the meek. So when you have to put your resume together and someone asks for your qualities, being meek is not something you're going to put on a resume. Like, what's your quality? Well, I'm very meek. You're probably not going to get that job, right? Well, but think about it. When Jesus calls us to be meek, he says they will inherit the earth. How does the earth get inherited? How does someone grab land? We know this very well. It's through guns and tanks and violence, not through being meek. But Jesus is saying, see, that's the whole point. Do not store up for yourself treasures on earth, where you're accumulating aggressively. Because guess what? Moths and vermin are going to destroy, and thieves will break in. Now, this isn't high philosophy. It's just practical. This is reality. I remember a time when back in 2007, 6, I had to go to New Orleans. They had Hurricane Katrina in 2005, and so it's the year after I went to help clean up, and we just had to like gut homes, just so that they can start rebuilding. There's mold and all kinds of things. Well, people left their stuff in there as they just ran. So there's one house, we had this massive 50-inch TV or something that you had to get it out of the door, and it's trash because it's obviously trash. But we don't want to carry this big old TV through the front door. I mean, it's a lot of, it's heavy. So we just took like a hammer to it and we just smashed it into bits and pieces, and we took the bits and pieces out of the door to throw it in trash. Now, that's what Jesus is saying. Well, the things that we seek and aggressively pursue and want, that's not going to last. What is going to last? The kingdom of God. How do you seek the kingdom of God? You got to be meek. You got to seek first His kingdom and His righteousness. And there is a humility about us. There is a intentional focus on living according to the kingdom reality that Jesus has broken into the present, and not our kingdom reality. Our kingdoms are going to fall and fail. His will never. And so again, the chiastic structure helps us read Matthew 6:19-34 in a different light. Matthew 5 verse 6, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Check out the expansion of the teaching in Matthew 6 verse 1-18. Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not announce it with trumpets, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets, to be honored by others. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so you may give in secret. Then your Father who sees what is done in a secret will reward you. When you pray, do not be like hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the street corners to be seen by others. Truly, I tell you, they receive their reward in full. But when you pray, go into your room, close the door, pray to your Father who is unseen. Then your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. And when you pray, do not keep on babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of the many words. Do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask Him. This then is how you should pray. Our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also have forgiven our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For if you forgive other people when they sin against you, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others their sins, your Father will not forgive your sins. When you fast, do not look somber as hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head, wash your face, so it will not be obvious to others you're fasting, only to your Father who is unseen. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Hunger and thirst to be right in whose eyes? That matters. God's eyes or human eyes? Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst to be right in God's eyes. They'll be filled. Don't worry about what people think. Worry about what God thinks. Do it for the Lord. Again, notice this is not just individual, this is communal. Swanee Church of Christ. Blessed are you who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. So as a community, we're to display this practice of what we want to do is right in God's eyes, not in human eyes. Now, there's certainly an individual component to this, right? And that's because that's how communities are formed. Individuals form the community. But as a people and as individuals in the community, who do we want to be right before? God or the human beings? Matthew 5 verse 7, blessed are the peace, merciful, for they'll be shown mercy. Its expansion is in Matthew 5, verse 38 to 48. You've heard it say, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, but I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. Notice the merciful and being merciful requires us to respond to threats in a different way. You know, in verse 43, you've heard it say, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. Being merciful as a community. Responding differently to the challenges that we are faced, the things that happen to us. Because we want to be a merciful people of the Lord. Matthew 5, verse 8, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. And its expansion is in Matthew 5, verse 27 to 37. You've heard it say, you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Notice the connection between pure in heart and they'll see God. When we look at other people with lustful eyes, we are degrading them. We are reducing them from being God's image bearers to just an object. But when we see them as God sees them, as his image bearers, then actually when we see that person, we see God, we see God's creation. And we see God's image bearers, reflecting God into the world. You know, it's interesting, that same pure in heart expansion includes divorce. And that's a whole nother topic I'm not going to get into. But I want to just make this point. In verse 31, it says, it has been said, anyone who divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you, anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual immorality makes her a victim of adultery, and anyone who marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Now, the context of this is that back in the day, no different than today, people could divorce their wives for just absolutely flimsy reasons. Or you burnt the food, get out, you're divorced. And then again, being that it was a patriarchal society, women had no rights. And so, as you can imagine, that left a woman in an exceptionally vulnerable position. And so Jesus challenges that and says, hey, you can't just divorce for whatever reason, because that was what was commonly taught and commonly practiced. But here's the gist of it, the focus of it. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Can people see God in your marriage? That's what Jesus is saying. This verse in 32 can become a debate about divorce and the exception clause and immorality and so on and so forth. I think we're misplacing the point of what Jesus is saying. He's saying, blessed are the pure in heart. This is what it looks like to be pure in heart. In our marriages, God is displayed. God is glorified. But when we reduce this to just simple rules and laws and so on, we kind of miss the whole point of seeing God, because our heart's pure, because we want to honor God in our marriage. Blessed are the pure in heart. What would it look like in our marriages where we really are displaying the purity in our hearts, and our spouses are radiant or handsome? If you're the husband, if you don't want to be radiant, you can be handsome, and that God is displayed through your marriage. That's challenging, right? I know it's challenging for me, because it's so easy to reduce marriage to just some, for sex, for example. In fact, there's a reason why Jesus connects the previous passage about lust with the passage in marriage about immorality, because he knows our human tendency. It could be about meeting needs. I want my needs met in my marriage. And you better meet my need, because if you don't meet my need, I'm going to find someone who will meet my need. That's not pure in heart. That's not seeing God in the marriage. That's seeing yourself in the marriage. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they'll see God. And what does that look like? It looks like when we are displaying God's image bearers, and we see each other as God's image bearers, and we see marriage as the covenant that it is, that is to be celebrated. There's so much more to be said. I won't, because it's winding down on time here. So Matthew 5 verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. You've heard it say in the expansion of the teaching, Matthew 5:21 to 26, you've heard it say to people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you, anyone who's angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Look at what Jesus says we should do. Therefore, if you're offering, verse 23, your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly. Why? Because blessed are peacemakers, to bring the peace of Christ into this world. So as a community, we are peacemakers. But notice, peacemakers does not mean ignoring the issues. Jesus speaks about go and be reconciled. What does reconciliation mean? I thought Jake did a great job in his communion on Sunday, speaking about the challenge of reconciliation. It's not easy. In fact, leaving things undealt with is far easier, but then it's always going to come back to bite us because it's not resolved. Genuine reconciliation takes hard work, sacrifice, but it's genuine peacemaking happens. There's genuine peace. That would be called children of God. And Matthew 5 verse 10, blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And the expansion of teaching, Matthew 5:11 to 20, blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. That because of me is important, because sometimes we're not persecuted because of Jesus. We're persecuted. Actually, we're prosecuted, not persecuted, because we did some things we're not supposed to. Then you can't turn that into persecution. No, you're getting prosecuted for what you did, man. That's not right. That's illegal. But you're persecuted because of Jesus Christ. Rejoice, be glad, for great is your reward in heaven. And then it carries on about being salt of the earth, being the kingdom people, being the people who live out in the present, the future, eternal life that Jesus has brought into the present. Now I'll end on this note, Matthew 7 verse 21 to 29. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only those who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many times I've heard this often. The Sermon on the Mount is reduced to, that's just high moral philosophy or teaching that you're not supposed to really practice. That's not what Jesus says. He says, you will enter the kingdom. Not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven. The only one who does the will of my Father. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, drive out demons, perform many miracles? And I'll tell you plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew, beat against that house, yet it did not fall, because it had its foundations on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice, like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash. When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as the teachers of the law. Jesus calls us as a community to live out his kingship in practice. And again, this is not a solo sport. We're not to do this by ourselves. He's calling us to be a people, community that lives out his lordship in practice. And really the key in understanding Sermon on the Mount is no one has arrived. this side of eternity. I've always need help. You always need help. The problem becomes when we don't think we do, when we think we've arrived, when we use our positions perhaps to say, you can't challenge me because you're less than me. You're a younger Christian than I am. So, hey, you can't talk to me. Or I'm in a leadership role differently than you. So you can't really say anything. That misses the point. We're always needing to be spiritual beggars, poor in spirit. And again, just to close out, the emphasis on the community. We're going to be a people of God as a team, living out, guided by the Holy Spirit, the Sermon on the Mount. It's not a solo sport. In fact, one of the interesting aspects when you read through the Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes, is there are some people who might have aspects of it that are maybe stronger than others. Some may be more poor in spirit than others. Some might be more hungry and thirsting for righteousness than others. But again, that's what makes the community a beautiful thing, because then we help one another. But it's not a solo sport, it's a team sport. In fact, if one person had to do this, the only person who did this is Jesus Christ. He lived out the Sermon on the Mount perfectly. But if I had to do it all by myself, it's going to crush me. If you try to do this all by yourself, it'll crush you. Because it's not meant to be. It's just not a solo sport, right? So imagine that, let's say there's a situation where you wanting to help your neighbor with something. Maybe they have an addiction of some sort. You're trying to help them out. You do it on your own. It's like, wow, I can't do it. I don't even know how to begin. But next thing you know, you get the community. You look around, you say, hey, who can help? And you get this person, that person. Why don't you go study the Bible with this person? And they do that. And then someone else in the community is the medical professional. And so, hey, do you know any rehab centers? So on and so forth. And next thing you know, you got 5, 6 people in the community, maybe 10, 12, getting together and say, hey, how can we help? How do we contribute? That's the picture of God's people living out the Sermon on the Mount in practice. And no one has arrived. No community has arrived. And no individual has arrived. May the Lord be with any community that thinks they've arrived. But we're the perfect church. Like, wow. And that someone made this joke to me long time ago. They said, hey, you know what? We used to be the perfect church till you joined. It's like, ouch, really? It's always that joke of, no, we're all needing to be humble. And so I wanted to mention this before I close out. Jesus critiques creation, us. He critiques us. He creates us too, and he critiques us. He critiques societies. And Sermon on the Mount is such a key aspect of critiquing society. And he calls his people to live out countercultural lifestyle. And so I want to encourage us to go back to the Jesus call of living as his Sermon on the Mount people. Because if we are not careful, we can then we can sort of, first of all, we can either pretend that everything is great and miss the critique. And that's not being poor in spirit. Or we can start looking at people who do critique, because other people have also critiqued society, because we all know this is not the way it's supposed to be, right? And then we can start to fall trapped to ideologies, or we can start to criticize things as being of some ideology, or that's just Marxism. I'm not going to even deal with that. Yeah, don't deal with that, but deal with Sermon on the Mount. Jesus talks about social justice in the Sermon on the Mount. He talks about how to love people, how to hunger and thirst for righteousness, where we're not doing it for show, we're doing it to honor God. He calls us to be his people. He calls us to be the one family of all nations. He calls us to treat people in a way that he says you can't even get angry. That's like murder. You can't be a Christian and be racist. That's not Marxist teaching or any other ideology teaching. That's Jesus teaching. Like, that's impossible. You can't be that. You can't say I'm a Christian, I don't want to be with those people, or I'm not going to associate myself with. That's not going to be. That's not Sermon on the Mount teaching, right? That's not following Jesus Christ. In fact, that's some ideology you've picked up and you're sort of, slapping a Christian label on. But when we are being the people of Christ who take his sermon seriously, then we constantly are being critiqued by his sermon and by the Spirit of God and by our own community. And that's where we come back to being poor in the Spirit. No one's arrived. So if you have aspects of racism in you, you're in the right community. It's like, what? Did you say that? Yeah, you're in the right community, in the Sermon on the Mount community. Be poor in spirit. And you have this whole slew of things in the Sermon on the Mount that's going to help us. Be open, be vulnerable, and you will receive mercy and help and repentance. And you'll put Jesus' teachings in practice. And as a community, we are going to be transformed by his grace. No one's arrived this side of eternity. And so again, as we look at the chiastic teaching of Sermon on the Mount, hopefully it's very helpful in reading and unpacking the Beatitudes that Jesus teaches us. And he says, this is what it looks like to be the people of the King. And it is very different if you really think about it, because he starts with people of the King are poor in spirit. And you're like, man, shouldn't he start with people of the King are rich in spirit? No, he knows us. He says, no, I know you. You know what? I love you. And come be my people. And God will help us grow. He calls us to have a soft heart, be a people that are humble, be a people who hunger and thirst for righteousness, be a people who mourn with the sin in the world, who want to contribute, do something about it. Be the people that are merciful, be the people that are pure in heart, be the people that are peacemakers, be the people that that are open to being persecuted because we love our King. And he calls us to a countercultural lifestyle, to love all people, to be the city on a hill. And we say, amen, Lord, we shall do so. And God will do his thing as he builds his kingdom. And he uses us, poor in spirit, for his glory. Thank you so much, church. Hopefully this has been helpful. And thank you again, and God bless you.